law should not choose the shadow of the first creator when the real wound was made by the hands that deployed the tool carelessly and the fool who chose to weaponize it. Let me just flip the context because Gov is doing the same squirrel again and their DAP didn't respond to the real matter in this motion. This is not like school shooting incident, but we are forced to reconcile that with our LO because we know that they will be unresponsive if we didn't do it. What Joseph told you is that AI labs are a lab of people who build and release the raw code model that you have. It's not necessarily the people who host it, package it, or turn it into the final product that you use. It's the innovator of the technology utilized by Gemini, DeepSeek, and OpenAI. These are the groups of codes they sell the codes and not the data set and the products because their contractors, which are Gemini, OpenAI, and all of those companies, are the ones who web scrape and train these data models. So this deals with the fact that their PM talked about why it's going to be harmful because they steal this data, they create the harmful set of the trainable asset. Therefore, that's not true because these are just the raw code model that you have. That's why Gov remains super irrelevant in this debate. And this all actually washes all of their malicious intent. Okay, sure.
Simple question on this. You necessarily think that this particular debate does not arise out of the fact that accountability comes from the people who are training this AI, then who do you think has to take the total accountability?
I mean, the one who trains this AI, just like what I said, are the companies because they're the one who web scraped it and turned this within their own data set and models. You need to read more paper in order for you to know how to debate this debate. Think of it like this. I invent a kitchen knife design for culinary purposes. Then a company mass produces it with poor safety checks because it's dull and easily scatters. Then some idiot uses it to stab someone's butt. You do not say that the original designer is the one who should carry the main blame because too many later actors made separate choices that actually turned the object into harm. The same intuition applies here. Once other actors take the code, deploy it badly, and misuse it, the liability should sit closer to the people who control the dangerous use. So if the state wants to impose liability, it should do so on companies like DeepSeek, for example, to the extent that they are the actors packaging and deploying and making the model meaningfully available for the real world in the real scale. Hopefully, their whip will respond to this meaningfully. That's why states have strong regulation against AI porn, for example, like on Texas, because within the status quo, the one who actually turn those AI video capability that you get from the code are the real companies that who utilizes that. So probably you should sue those companies and not the ones who created the code, right? Because the code is just primarily designed for AI to generate video, for example. So necessarily, I don't think they get a real margin of change here because you don't sue these companies, therefore you don't regulate it that much, which leads to my first extension. They create a lazy state and a lazy market by suing the wrong actor. This means that once law keeps upstream labs legally exposed for every downstream misuse, both the state and the market stop building regulation at the point where harm is actually operationalized. That happens because once policymakers believe that they have already quote unquote solved AI harm by keeping liability attached to the lab, because that's primarily the optics of this debate and the primary purpose why they're trying to pander for it, they feel less pressure to regulate the actors who control development and deployment, access, and safeguard in the real world. Sure, your PM didn't take any POI, but I'll take one again.
Please read the context slide. It says we are going to hold AI companies accountable, not people who are going ahead and coding.
Because you have a lot of companies who also use coding. You have a company that deploys it. You also have a company that use codings, for example. Of course, it's going to be filled with companies. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily get one coder to create the code, right? You have a company that creates that code. This is so harmful. But yeah, in other words, the law creates a false sense of completion. It looks like accountability exists, but it is being placed too early in the chain. So the places where harm is actually enabled remain underregulated in their side. Please debate the real context. That is so bad because the real critical harm doesn't usually come from the raw code sitting in the vacuum created by these companies. It comes from someone repackaging it. It comes from their contractors, which are OpenAI, for example, making it usable, scaling it, distributing it, and weakens the filter that we have in this debate. If you keep liability upstream, you teach the rest of the ecosystem that safety is someone else's job. What we say is much simpler. Once liability is cut off at the upstream lab, it does not follow the one that can be sued when AI is involved. It means that the law is forced to move downstream toward the actors who are actually packaged, deployed, and distributed, fine-tuned, and access all of the system. So that means that their panic of like, once AI is involved, nobody's liable, Right now, you already have Elon Musk suing OpenAI. Why is that true in the real life? You guys really don't have any context here. It reallocates liability inside government so that the people with actual operational control over the dangerous use isn't really going to be paced within the legislation. But Gov said that once AI is attached, you cannot sue the companies that uses technologies involved like OpenAI. Again, just like what I said, the existence of AI lab in the chain does not mean downstream companies suddenly become unusable in the status quo. In fact, OpenAI itself imposes warnings, restriction, and misuse enforcement right now due to the lawsuits that they are facing. That's why in our world, the state is forced to regulate through ex ante conduct rules and not just ex post lawsuits. Because once you shield the upstream lab, regulators can no longer lazily say that we'll just let the courts sort it out by suing the original creator. They now have to write actual rules for the actors who control development and practice, who can access the model, what identity checks are required, what logs must be kept, and what sectors need licensing. That's why the first improvement is that our side pushes the regulation. Our side actually pushes the regulation towards the proper actor, and their side doesn't do that. Second, our side produces more specific regulation because downstream actors differ by the context in a way upstream labs don't. Take note, this is how legislation works. You cannot just simply say that just because you generate like the video creation code, that doesn't mean that you will create specific nuances on how it's going to be used. In both sides, AI is still going to be used. So you need to sue the actual actor to create better regulation on that. Like, how are you going to define what counts as an AI porn? Is it the soft porn that you have? Is it all of this creation? All of that will happen if you actually try to legislate better. Third, in our side, we create continuous compliance incentives, not just fear after the fact. So if you regulate the deployer, the host, and integrator, all of that, those actors have to keep proving safety every day. So we say that in your world, actually it's going to be harmful because you know what happens? Good faith labs, university, and public interest researchers becomes more hesitant to release models because in your side, maybe you will have Western, I don't know, Western companies, for example. The problem is Western legal liability doesn't care about this, like offshore groups, anonymous open source DOMs, black markets communities, and militarized actors. These are the ones who keep moving anyway. So in your side, this will still remain. It's going to be abused. By the way, it's not yet time. It just hit 7 in my end. But yeah, afterwards, permanent upstream exposure means that only the richest firms with giant legal budgets can survive in your world, and you cannot sue them in Gulf since they can just be secretive in nature because they're private companies. That's why all of the data set that you will have is just shittier.